At dawn on June 6, 1944, the sand of Omaha Beach was still cool, but the air already smelled of metal. Inside bunkers behind the dunes, German machine gunners knew their chance of returning alive was 1 in 5. The MG42 entered history as the fastest killing machine of the Second World War. It was called the bone saw because it spat 1,550 rounds a minute with a ripping cloth sound. Designed mid-war, this light construction was both an engineering marvel and a threat even to seasoned soldiers. The barrel was slim and light, so the gunner had to change it every 200 rounds, risking his life under fire. Each gun nest was manned by a crew of 3 or 4. One man fired, another fed the belt, a third hauled ammunition. These men lived as one unit, but in truth, they were a target for every weapon on that flooded shore. Allied commanders knew that to break through they had to silence the machine gun, so artillery and aircraft pounded MG42 positions without pause. Shells and bombs smashed concrete and steel, but often missed the deeply dug firing chambers. The Germans built nests from concrete, covered entrances with sandbags, and disguised them with nets. Machine guns were set to sweep every 100 meters of beach, turning it into a killing field. They fired along the shoreline, cutting down rows of soldiers coming off landing craft and stopping the attack in its first minutes. But as soon as engineers blew the wire and smoke drifted away, snipers and commanders focused their attention on those nests. Why did 8 out of 10 gunners never make it home when their weapon was considered the best in the world? The answer lies not only in firepower, but also in the vulnerability that came with serving in such a crew. An MG42 chewed through ammunition like fire through dry leaves. It required a constant supply of belts, each weighing several kilograms. Ammo carriers dragged boxes through sand and under fire, exposing themselves to mortal danger just to keep the gun alive. Changing the barrel was a short procedure, but it left the crew silent for a few seconds, and in those seconds, a shell or bullet could find the slit in the bunker. Allied snipers watched for the moment when the gun went quiet and fired precisely into the narrow opening where a hand or head appeared. Add to this the constant engine hum, the smell of powder and diesel fumes from nearby vehicles, and you can feel how hard it was to breathe in a concrete box. Soldiers later wrote that the MG42 roar was so loud it deafened them, and the recoil made their arms shake. Inside, it was as cramped as a packed elevator. A man stood and hid his helmet on the low roof. The smell of cordite mixed with sweat and oil and hands were always dirty with black grease. The closer the landing craft came, the more the water churned and the noise of engines drowned out everything else. When the ramp dropped, the gunner could only hold the trigger and ignore fear and pain. At Omaha, there was a well-known crew where Heinrich Severloh served. He claimed his machine gun stayed in action all day. Later, he said he fired tens of thousands of rounds, and that memory haunted him, reminding him how thin the line between duty and nightmare can be. Historians debate the true number of hits, but one fact remained. MG42s on Omaha killed many Allied soldiers and lost almost all of their own gunners. Why did this happen? Some believe training and equipment were insufficient for a prolonged fight. Courses were short, time was tight, and recruits sometimes did not know how to conceal a position properly. Others point out that the Allies used layered suppression tactics, artillery, aircraft, smoke, armour, and snipers. Gunners simply could not respond to every threat, especially when smoke obscured their view and clogged the sight. More important is this: the MG42 was the primary target for every American and British soldier because it posed the greatest danger. Officers gave specific orders to shoot into embrasures, throw grenades, flank and destroy gun crews, which led to enormous losses among German machine gunners. By noon, many nests were silent as infantry crossed the beach and began assaulting the bluffs. One by one, bunkers fell silent, sometimes because a direct hit knocked them out, sometimes because those inside were killed or driven out. Picture a soldier who had not slept all night hearing heavy footsteps above and waiting for the attack. He had only a helmet and uniform. His tool was his MG42, which he knew like his own hand. His hands remembered the smooth grip and hot barrel after firing. He imagined each burst sending death toward the sea and knew that every minute brought him closer to the inevitable. Each bullet leaving an MG42 was part of a chain. The belt slid under his hand, humming and heating as his mate fed a new one. Sometimes the belt jammed and then you had to tug it quickly lest you become a target. American helmets bobbed between the waves. Flashes in the distance showed naval guns at work. The sound of explosions merged with the metallic clatter of empty cases hitting the concrete floor. Gusts of wind swept through the embrasure, carrying the salty smell of the sea and ash. The weight of the weapon and the ammunition pressed on shoulders, and dust stuck to the eyes. Many crews never managed to leave their positions. The escape hatch through which they could have fled was narrow and at the back. When a bunker took a hit, fragments flew inside, and a man trapped in the corner had no time to get out. Families of these soldiers waited at home, but telegrams arrived rarely and often said only one word: missing. A mother reading a short note did not know her son manned a gun that struck fear, yet condemned him to death. Years passed and survivors recalled that day describing the smell of burning and the cries of the wounded. They said the MG42 sound remained in their ears forever, like a giant bee reminding them of those who did not return. Later, historians calculated that for every 10 MG42 gunners, only 2 were alive by evening. Such numbers show that manning this formidable weapon was deadly. Soldiers wrote home that the beach was hell, and they prayed to survive it. In those letters, the code and number MG42 often appeared, along with the sense of inevitability that accompanied its sound. Why did Germany continue to use the MG42 on the beaches, knowing the risks? Because it had no choice. Mobile artillery pieces were scattered, tanks could not react quickly, and machine guns remained the only way to stop the tide of the landing. MG42s were relatively cheap and quick to produce. Assembly took about 75 hours, and the cost was lower than the previous model. That allowed tens of thousands of units to be delivered, but gave no way to give crews proper protection and supply. Thus, the fate of many gunners was predetermined. Surviving was a miracle, dying a probability. These men knew they were following orders and often could not abandon their positions even when officers signaled retreat. Each story is about choosing between duty and the desire to live. Some closed the embrasure with their bodies saving comrades, others dropped the gun and ran only to be tormented by guilt for life. After the war, many survivors were young, yet there was something distant in their eyes as if they had never left that beach. They recalled that the night after the battle was the longest, and the quiet sound of rain on a roof reminded them of empty cases hitting the floor. Modern museums where rare MG42s are displayed remind visitors that behind this flawless machine stand human destinies. Some exhibits even let you hear the firing sound so guests can understand why Allied soldiers called it the electric knife. Today, we say that war always brings death, but we rarely remember that every weapon has a price. The MG42 gave German soldiers a chance to hold back the blow, but it took their lives, and that memory lingers in each rusty barrel. Remembering the 80% of gunners who died, we see that a person matters more than a machine, regardless of victories behind him. Now, when the remains of bunkers stand on Omaha, the sea whispers the same stories, but we can learn from mistakes. This story is not about who was stronger. It is about the fates of people caught in the gears of a global tragedy. Our duty is to remember their names and numbers and see life, not statistics. After the war, analysts studied efficiency and lost lives. They examined tactics, bunker construction, and psychology. They found that even perfect discipline could not protect crews from destruction under the layered Allied fire. Records show that training took place on ranges where soldiers learned to change barrels in 5 seconds. Yet on the beach, conditions were different. Sand-clogged mechanisms, smoke-obscured sights, and bullet storms left no time to think. Allies used many weapons to force MG42 crews out: heavy machine guns, mortars, and flamethrowers that poured fire into embrasures. Some gunners tried to block the slits with coats, but heat and flame crept inside, forcing them to crawl out into fire. Where concrete nests withstood direct hits, crews died from lack of water and air. Diaries note that some crews sat in their gun rooms for 10 hours without relief until comrades replaced them. But on Omaha, there was no replacement. Could their chances have been improved? Historians disagree. Thicker armour would have slowed production, and more hatches would have weakened protection. Post-war versions like the MG3 and MG42/59 corrected mistakes, better cooling, a removable hatch, and lower rate of fire. But these innovations came too late for those who burned in the inferno of 1944. After positions fell, the surviving gunners became prisoners and remembered how American medics pulled them from ruined bunkers. Many were stunned by the humanity of the enemy, who aided those who had held the beach under stormfire just hours earlier. These stories seldom enter textbooks, but they show that even in chaos, there is room for compassion. Allied soldiers later admitted they hated the MG42 sound, but respected the bravery of the crews who held the line to the end. Until the end of the war, the MG42 continued to thunder on different fronts, reminding us of those who did not return. Today, its sound is heard only in museums, and that is how it should be, so we can remember without pain. This video is intended solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not contain ideology or propaganda.